Hi everybody, I'm Greg Fishel. Welcome to yet another bonus weather video relating to radar. The more I think about this, the more I could probably do about 10 or 15 of these. But the latest idea that I had, and I've entitled this, Can Radar Replace Weather Balloons? Well, no, it can't. But there is one thing it can do, which at any given point during the day can give you an idea as to how the winds are changing with height as you go up in the atmosphere. And that's something we can see in real time, whereas the weather balloons only go up twice a day. And in some cases around the country with the budget cuts, they're not going up at all. So let's go on ahead and delve into this here. And I thought you'd be interested to see how high the middle of the radar beam gets as you go out. And the increase in height is exponential. In other words, it gets bigger and bigger as you go up. But the interesting thing about the Raleigh radar, which is actually located in Clayton, right off Highway 70, is that the National Weather Service here has the elevation angle at 0.2 degrees. Just about every other National Weather Service Doppler radar I've seen is at 0.5. Usually, you don't want to have it too close to horizontal because then you're running the risk of getting a lot of ground returns, but it could very well be, and I'd have to, call some of my buddies out there and ask them about this. But it could very well be they've developed some really good algorithms to get rid of the ground clutter. And of course, the nice thing, if they can get away with it, that means that the beam at 120 miles is more than 3,000 feet lower than it is at the same distance from the Wilmington radar, which is at 0.5 degrees. So the lower the beam as you go out, in distance from the radar, the better chance you have of detecting things. So, but I thought you might find that interesting, that it gets pretty darn high by the time you get out to 120 miles. Okay, so this is like a poor man's version of a velocity image, and the customary color configuration is the greens stand for inbound objects, raindrops, dust, whatever, and then the reds are outbound. So if the radar is in the middle, okay, right in there, okay, then that would mean that the greens, it's detecting winds coming toward it here, and I mean to pick a different color, going away from it here, okay? But this gray is the zero velocity line. In other words, that means that the radar is not detecting any motion either toward or away from the radar. And so what you do is you basically draw a line that's perpendicular to that zero velocity line from the inbounds to the outbounds. So in this case, the upper levels are on the outer edges of the circle because the beam's getting higher as you go out, and the low levels are in the middle. And because that zero velocity line is straight, that means the winds are westerly at all altitudes, okay, all the way from the ground up to however high the beam is. However, what happens if you get a pattern like this? Well, this is called what meteorologists call an S-shaped velocity pattern. And again, when you're diagnosing the winds, you want to draw the line perpendicular as best you can from the inbounds to the outbounds. So remember, the upper levels are on the outer part of the circle and the low levels are toward the middle. So if you draw in those arrows like this, then at the surface, right at the radar site, it's showing a southwesterly wind. But because of that fact that the zero velocity line is curved like an S, that means that the winds, I don't know, maybe a few thousand feet above the ground are more southwesterly. And by the time you get up to maybe, 9 or 10,000 feet, that they're westerly. And you may or may not remember this, and those of you that are new subscribers, you probably never heard me talk about this, but one of the things you can tell about what's going on in the atmosphere temperature-wise is if the wind direction is turning clockwise as you go up in the atmosphere, so southwest to west to northwest, we call that veering. And a veering wind profile means you're in warm advection, that wind is transporting warmer air, or at least trying to transport warmer air into your region. And that can be associated with upward motion, clouds, precipitation, a whole bunch of things that aren't usually all that great. And then if you have the opposite of that, if the wind is backing in direction with height or turning counterclockwise, which would be like northwest at the surface, west in the mid-levels, and southwest aloft, high aloft, then that would mean you're in cold advection. And cold advection not only means it's getting colder, but it usually is associated with sinking air and a fair amount of sunshine. So sometimes you can look up at clouds at different layers and see them moving in different directions. And just by ascertaining what those directions are and how they're changing with height, then you can actually say, hey, I'm in warm advection or I'm in cold advection or whatever. It's sort of a neat thing that you can do just off the cuff, just by looking at the different layers of clouds and how they're moving. So this is it's not a substitute for a weather balloon, but it gives us real-time information about how the wind directions are changing with height. And that's a very, very valuable tool, because a lot of times when the wind is curving severely clockwise with height or veering with height, then that's a situation that can favor tornadoes if the other ingredients are there for thunderstorms. So it's just another way you can use radar. And of course, we couldn't do this before the Doppler capability came along. But once that came along in the late 80s and 90s, then we were able to do things like this, which is pretty cool. All right, that is bonus weather video. I don't know, I think it's the 6th one I've done on radar. And so talk about something different finally beginning tomorrow. And I hope you've enjoyed the series. And if you have any questions, let me know. And we'll talk to you again on Monday. Take care, everybody.